Alright, this seemed like an interesting thread. Askreddit thread. If we didn't read the book, what did we miss in the movie? Apparently, there are different colored bricks of roads. There are different colored brick roads in the Wizard of Oz. Red, blue, purple, etc. Different colored brick roads. We can see the red road starting with the yellow. It's never discussed. Red is also in the movie. I've read all of the Wizard of Oz books, and Lim Frank Baum must have been on some strong drugs. The film didn't have the Calades, or the city made out of China. One book in this series features a princess who grew up as a boy, which is rather forward-thinking. Now, another book has a beautiful woman who has a room full of heads so that she can switch. She tries to take Dorothy's head. Wow. And there's a badass tiger bear creatures that are horrifying. And the movie completely glosses over the fact that the Tin Man had a bewitched axe that caused him to keep chopping off his own body parts, which he would replace with the tin prosthetic. And they missed that the wizard totally ran the long con on all the characters in the book. He tells them he's a fraud after they catch him, and they're not pleased with his answer. So he puts on a bunch of needles in the Scarecrow's head so he'll be sharp. Get it? He puts a clock in the Tin Man's chest so that he has a ticker. And I seem to recall him giving the lion some potion or something of liquid courage. There's a ton of stuff in the Wizard of Oz that you miss if you didn't read it. You mean hard liquor? Peeves, the poltergeist in the Harry Potter series. Not sure why he wasn't in the movies. I remember that. I read all the books. I actually still haven't seen the last two movies. Oh, that's right. I remember distinctly how the ghost wasn't in the movies. I also remembered how bad the fifth movie was compared to the book. That's what I remember about Harry Potter. The fifth movie was really bad. For some reason. That's the one where they goblet of fire or something. I don't know. The other movies were fine. Just the fifth one was like really rushed. You missed the entire separate plot thread where Ender's sister and brother practically set the world's agenda via something akin to Reddit or a Tumblr blog. I don't care about Ender's Game. If you didn't read World War Z, then you missed World War Z. I think World War Z would have been far better as a mini-series rather than as a film. Having said that, I wonder, did the movie screenplay writer even read the book? Okay, so there are zombies and the Jews build a wall? Got it. The explanation I heard was that the studio bought the rights to the name, but not the content. I've heard rumors that the film was almost completely finished, but then his studio acquired the name World War Z and slapped it on an already finished film for brand recognition. I know that's not true. It was filming for a while and had lots of reshoots resulting in the film that we got. You know, from what I've read about the World War Z book, it actually sounds pretty good. I watched the movie. It's, like, not a bad movie. It's generic, yes, but that doesn't mean bad. But the book actually sounds pretty interesting. It's about a guy who goes around and basically documents what would actually happen if a zombie apocalypse hit the world. In like a realistic way. It's like, yeah, well, the zombies develop rigor mortis and they stop moving after a couple of weeks. That's not something that's ever brought up in zombie movies. The entire meaning of the name I Am Legend. I'm always seeing this about this. Where did that movie go wrong? To add, the vampires in the books aren't just coherent. Neville mistook one for being uninfected and took her in. Turns out the vampires have been able to develop medicine that keeps them from being mindless monsters. For the most part, they're just like humans, only they have to stay out of the sun. And here's Neville, going out in the daytime, hunting from house to house and slaughtering them. To them, he is the monster. He is the legend of the thing that comes out during the daytime. To be fair, there were still some crazy vamps that stalked his house, and Vagina flashed him. What? Oh yeah, that vampire. I remember her well. I wonder why they didn't just simply blow up his place. I'm sure somewhere there was a bazooka or a tank. Just roll over to his house and be done with him. Those vampires were basically mindless infected. When the organized infected came for him, they had no trouble getting in. I can't remember exactly how they got in because it's not been a very long time since I read the book, but I believe they either blew a hole in the wall or crashed with an armored vehicle to open a breach and captured him at gunpoint. That sounds interesting. The lengthy discussion in the book Jurassic Park around chaos theory were very interesting. The movie touched on it for like 10 seconds. The humor in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy books is totally lost in the movies. That reminds me, I need to finish those books. Like, I have all the audiobooks on my computer. I only listened to like half of the first one, though. I need to finish that up. That's actually perfect. I go running for like 45 minutes in the morning. And I've been looking for a book to listen to. I should probably just put Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy on my iPod. It's funny because Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy has been so many different things. Book, movie, game, etc. But it started as a radio play, if I recall correctly. I thought they did a decent job with the movie. The casting was excellent. And I was rather sad we didn't get a sequel. You missed some really great nerdy shit in The Martian. You missed some awesome analysis of exactly what went wrong all those times he nearly died. You know, from what I heard from a whole bunch of reviews, people have read the book and watched the movie. Basically, they cut out a lot of math because it was boring. A lot of people basically said The Martian, the book, was basically a guy who did a whole bunch of math about how someone could possibly survive on Mars and basically wrote a book around his research. So he was really happy about showing all his formulas and showing off, basically, when he really should have cut it down. That being said, I think they also cut his humor a little bit, too. But them cutting out a lot of the science thing isn't necessarily a bad thing. Game of Thrones is missing about half the characters. Well, I wouldn't say half. They are missing a few characters. A couple of important characters, too, but it works. But the biggest thing, in my opinion, is the show lacks the sheer grandeur of the book's descriptions. Winterfell is supposed to be massive enough to house all the country farmers and their families for years of winter. Damn. I can forgive them for omitting most of the characters, but they should have worked in Strong Belwas. But they should have worked in... Oh, that's right, they didn't show Strong Belwas. There's a reason he's not in the show. Strong Belwas lets everyone cut him once. Bravos. Losing fat. Strong Belwas, he's the guy who comes with... Oh wait, there's probably people who are watching this who haven't... I won't say any spoilers. I've read all the Game of Thrones books. But the biggest thing, in my opinion, is the show lacks grandeur. Yeah, this is one of the biggest complaints. The first time I realized this might be a problem was during the hands turning. In the book, they talk about how it's a huge spectacle and people are coming from all over to watch and compete. Then in the show, it's like a couple hundred people watching from a tiny set of stands. Also, in my opinion, the aging up of a lot of characters makes some of their decisions look a lot worse. A lot of the stuff Robb Stark does makes more sense when he's a 16-year-old kid doing it, etc. Tom Bombadil and the Scurrying of the Shire. The Borrow Right. And missing the white becomes incredibly plot important. Actually, I think someone over here says it. Honestly, as a Tolkien fanatic, seriously, I made a point to reread Lord of the Rings once per year. How can you do that? Those books are so boring. I've read all the Lord of the Rings books. All three of them. It was boring. I'm kind of okay with this. Bombadil didn't really need to be in Lord of the Rings. Tolkien says he's there to show that there's always some mystery in Middle-earth that can never be known. But in practice, he just drags the already slow pace of the first part of Fellowship to a dead crawl. I'm not ashamed to admit that I usually skip from entering the Old Forest directly to arriving at the prancing pony. I already know everything that happens in Bombadil's house, and there's nothing of interest there in repeating readings. Tom Bombadil, he's the guy who's immune to the ring's power. He's supposed to be like a super powerful deity in Lord of the Rings. And he's just kind of a weird guy. He's not evil, but he's not a good guy either. He puts on the ring, he doesn't work on him, he just hands it back. That's supposed to be like a really big deal in Lord of the Rings. Everyone turning on Dolores Umbridge. The teachers were advising Peeves. The teachers were advising Peeves, the poltergeist also not featured in the movies, to fuck shit up in Hogwarts. I hated Umbridge more than Voldemort. Also, Voldemort died like a regular person in the books. He didn't fade away into the wind. What's this? I never saw the last movie, but now I'm annoyed that he didn't just die like a normal person. That was part of the point. It was the point. Voldemort was toying with immortality, and he died like any other mortal person. Also, a huge part of the book was that it happened publicly. No more, he's still alive, or Harry has secret powers. Harry stood up in front of everyone and countered every one of Voldemort's ideological points. He defended Snape, Dumbledore, offered mercy, then killed him cold dead for everyone to see. He didn't just kill him, he destroyed all belief in him. Didn't he just rebound his curse back with Expelliarmus? I think I remember that. McDonald's sass. Dear God, the sass. Some of Harry's too. There's no need to call me sir, Professor. I don't know what they're referring to. In The Martian, the second rover wasn't destroyed, and that's the one he drilled the hole into make the bubble. He made the bubble so there was room for all his life support. He also had a kick-ass inflatable bedroom tent he would attach to the airlock of his rover to sleep in. He also lost contact with NASA a second time before his trip. He had to figure out a lot on his own. Watney also had to figure out he was driving into a big dust storm, much different than the first, and science the shit of how to figure out which way it was moving and how to get to Eris 4. Bunch of other stuff too, go read the book. His trip to Eris 4 is so much better in the books. I think they simply cut a lot of that out due to time constraints. In the never-ending story, you missed a lot, but mainly that the childlike empress was fucked up. She was a complete moral relatives. Oblate, one with unconditional love for everything and everyone. She lured hundreds of children into her world with her magic book, and drained them of all of the memories of their home, themselves, and their families until they could do nothing but play a game of shitty Pictionary in this one town for all eternity. Also, Audrey's horse could talk in the Swamp of Sadness, making that scene 500% more upsetting. Artax. See, I've never actually watched the movie or read the book of Neverending Story, but there's been a whole bunch of references in World of Warcraft about Neverending Story, and I've made videos which show those references. So I actually know about the horse and the Swamp of Sadness thing because it's referenced in World of Warcraft, and I've talked about it. Oh my god, I need to read the book. Also, Archer's horse could talk in the Swamp of Sadness, making that scene 500% more upsetting. I will never read the book. Yeah, the Swamp of Sadness, the horse gets stuck, and he has to leave him and it dies. I think that's where the Swamp of Sorrows names comes from. Just about the only thing the film Star Trek Trooper has in common with the book is the characters' names and space. It takes place in space. What is Star Trek Troopers? Starship Troopers. That looks like a generic shooter movie. You really miss just how shitty both Amy and Nick are in Gone Girl. If you didn't read the comic book of Wanted, you missed the parts where he becomes an insane rapist and travel to another dimension. Also, a world where supervillains actually won. Also, supervillains Wanted. Isn't that the one where they can twist the bullet or something? Yeah. If you watch the Percy Jackson... I don't think that is, actually. It's 2008. I think that might be too far away. If you watch the Percy Jackson movies without reading them, then you missed all the wonder, humor, concepts, and incredible writing. Percy Jackson. In general, the movies just miss out on everything that made the books worthwhile. Oh god, why does that sound familiar? Percy Jackson... Oh, those books. I never actually watched the movie. I've read like 3 of the fucking books though. Percy Jackson. True, but it's almost worth it to experience the glory that is the author's hatred of those movies. He doesn't like the movies. I never actually watched the movies, but I have read the books. I read them at school. So it's like, oh, they're making a movie about this. I should probably read the book. And holy crap, are those books generic as fuck. They're very targeted towards like young teenagers or something. It'd probably be a fun book for like brand new readers. And I think that's what they're targeted towards. But I read them and I was like, oh my god, this is like watching a very generic anime. I'm not going to read a book that's basically an incredibly generic anime with very generic villains and very generic and contrived plot points. A very generic main character. The whole thing was just ridiculously generic. I didn't like it. I mean, I read 3 of the books. Or maybe I only read 2 of them. I read more than one, and there was a couple more that were after the ones I read that I chose not to read because it's like I'm down with the story. I do kind of want to see how it all ends, but not enough to read the books. In the Virgin Suicides movie, the 4 remaining sisters all commit suicide at the same time at the end. One hangs herself, another drinks gin, and takes sleeping pills. One sits in a running car while it's in the garage. Another sticks her head in the oven. They all die the same night. In the book, only 3 of the girls died that night. The one that sticks her head in the oven actually survived, but later, weeks, months, killed herself anyway. Still, that remains one of my favorite film adaptations. I thought Sofia Coppola did an excellent job capturing the mood of the novel. That sounds like a good book. The Time Traveler's Wife is a much deeper book, which shows the implications of time travel aspects in a much darker detail, as well as the philosophical implications. The characters are more filled out, and we also see that Henry's death was pretty much inevitable. In the film, Henry just lies on the ground and gets shot. In the book, he has no feet, explaining why he is unable to escape. He also indicates that time travel is slowly killing Henry away anyway, and many people towards the end of the book believe he has cancer. The film kind of turned the story into a romance against the odds kind of thing, but the book was much more complex. I don't think I've ever seen that movie. Jonas was 12 in the book. Not sure why he's 16 in the Giver adaptation. The Giver. Oh, I never actually watched that. If you don't read The Hunger Games, you miss a lot of integral struggles Katniss faces and her reactions to those struggles and the various events that unfold in the books. If you watch Les Miserables, you miss reading a 1462 page book, unabridged edition, much of it filled with Victor Hugo's myriad of ramblings on philosophies and the state of the world. Yeah, I remember looking at a list on Wikipedia about some of the longest books ever made, and I remember Les Miserables, damn, I've heard the name of this, should be able to say it. I remember seeing this book in there. I was like, damn, I had no idea the book was that long. Also, Atlas Shrugged was on there, too. I read Atlas Shrugged. That's a good book. Even if I don't actually agree with the philosophy, I still thought it was a interesting read. I'm all for a whole bunch of narcissists doing anything they can to get what they want. It's not a good value to have, but it is one I personally follow. So it's not fun to read fantasy about a world where it actually works out, even though that's totally unrealistic. Also, Hunger Games, I read those books too. The books obviously were better than the movies, but the movies weren't bad. They didn't make me mad like the 5th Harry Potter movie did. But usually the movies are never better than the books, except there has only been one exception to this, and that was Chronicles of Narnia, Prince Caspian. I read all the Chronicles of Narnia books because I had them, and they were really small, which made them easy to read during class. They're not very good books, but I mean, they're not bad like the Percy Jackson books. And Prince Caspian, the movie was so much better than the book. Holy crap. It was the only time I've ever felt like, you know what, the movie was actually better. They took out a bunch of annoying stuff, and they kept in all the important stuff. And they expanded on the fights, which were just kind of glossed over in the books for some reason. Let's see here. I have so many angry feels about Mockingjay Part 2. After Finnick and Annie get married, Katniss doesn't just escape to fight in the Capitol. She decides if she and Johanna want to go to the Capitol and kill Snow, they gotta get their shit together. Katniss helps Johanna get out of the hospital wing and into their own room. They start training together, they're studying with each other. That short scene we see in the hospital in the second movie was supposed to be this long. Drawn out emotional bond and understanding one another. It's been discussed if Johanna has the gaze for Katniss and vice versa, and their attraction brings whatever you make of their relationship to light. Didn't they really cut out Finnick's story too? I mean, I'm still reading this, but I remember watching the third movie, or the fourth one, I think. And when Finnick died, I was so sad. It's like, Finnick, did they ever actually talk about his backstory, though? Because he was a really important character. And more importantly, the block test. That's where Katniss finally learns how to be a soldier by following orders. Incredibly ironic after being made a slave of the Capitol. Katniss passes the block test and is assigned to Squad 451. Johanna fails and ends up back in the hospital. Haymitch explains during Johanna's block test, they flooded her arena to see if she could handle water. Upon Katniss asking why she would need to withstand water like that, Haymitch explains that this was how the Capitol used to torture her. Some kind of waterboarding / electrical shock torture. Johanna's time in the Capitol was completely crossed over in light of Peeta's situation. Before departing with her squad, Katniss says goodbye to her family and then goes alone to ground level to collect a bunch of pine needles and a gauze bundle to present to Johanna, so that she could finally have a personal possession to call her own. That reminds her of the trees of her home district in 7. Johanna breaks out in tears and encourages Katniss to kill the shit out of President Snow. Not to mention all of the morphling withdrawals Johanna goes through, as mentioned, like the District 6 victors, and her trying to get a hold of drugs to help offset her shakes and queasy stomachs. Given it was PG-13, I can excuse that exclusion, but everything else was just skipped. Just a quick, I'll cover you if you want to sneak out in a hangar headed to the Capitol. Totally out of character for Johanna. I can't forgive that quick skip. Don't forget that District 13 locked up Katniss's makeup crew. She found them in the prison hold. I think they were being tortured too? Yes? Yeah, they were half-starved and didn't have a toilet. They were filthy and timid. The books didn't say what they experienced down there, but we can guess. Oh, I remember the Hunger Games books. They were really good until the ending, which was really stupid. In Ender's Game, you know what, the movie, though, really made it seem not as dumb, though. I always thought it was, like, really dumb. How did Prim get in the front lines? Why would they send her... you know what, it's whatever. It makes sense, and at the same time, it doesn't. It's a contrived plot convenience. But at the same time, it can probably make sense if you think about it a certain way. But in reality, it's just a contrived plot convenience. In Ender's Game, you don't really see a lot of the dragon army, and the movie cuts it out. The movie also cuts out Peter and Valentine's story, which is important to understand what is happening on Earth. The Shining. Most of what The Shining actually is. The movie is about a family that is trapped with a man who is slowly losing his mind due to some unknown force. The book is about a family that is trapped in a hotel where some strange supernatural stuff negatively affects the dad. Kubrick completely glossed over the entire premise of the book and still made an awesome film. Don't forget that it was Danny's powerful shining ability that makes the hotel's guests come alive. They want Danny and his powers, but to get him, they realize they have to trick his father into killing him. And in the book, the mom was mommed, but was fierce when she needed to be protected her son. The movie portrayed her as this weakling, and it was Danny standing up to the spirits, along with his father fighting his inner demons that saved his life. Most of the character developments in Trainspotting, never heard of it. If it was Aragon, half of the book. I remember watching the Aragon movie. I think I even owned the DVD. It was like I had to sell at Blockbuster when it came out or something. And that is a terrible, terrible book to movie adaptation. The worst movie adaptation I've ever seen. 12-year-old me learned a very hard life lesson about fucking disappointment that day. God, that movie was so bad. They glossed over everything. They kind of kept the plot points kind of the same. Like, they hit all the major things, but they just completely butchered everything else. And they even killed off 2 characters that are very important in literally the next book, so they can't make a sequel. Dexter only really follows book 1 before diverging off in its own thing in season 2. The big thing you miss is Cody and Aster becoming mini Dexters. What? They start killing animals, not people, but Dexter recognizes the same dark passenger in them as he has in himself and starts training them not to get caught. Also, it turns out Dexter's killing urge is in fact a supernatural evil spirit that attaches itself to abuse children. I didn't watch the whole show, but I assume that got left out. See, that would make more sense. Because one of the big things I hated about Dexter was the fact that they tried really hard to portray Dexter as some guy who had no emotions, and he killed people because of his urges. And as someone who's studied lots of psychology and studying in college for a psychological degree, I could tell you he was the most emotionless person I've ever seen, and it just pissed me off, and I could not get into it because it didn't suspend my disbelief. Is that the word for it? I don't know. It was just, I couldn't get past it. It's like, you are like an emotional teenager. What do you mean you don't have any emotions? That's bullshit. Bullshit. You are just pure bullshit. And killing things to drive off your urges, that is literally the worst thing you can do with urges. That's like punching a wall every time you get mad. That's something you don't want to do. It's common. It's in the common language. Common knowledge, I think. Yeah, it's in common knowledge that if you get mad and you hit something, you don't make the anger go away. The real thing to do is to not do that, because then you'll associate hitting things every time you get mad. If you have urges, you do something else to distract, not actually give in to them. But, I mean, his dad wasn't a psychologist. Of course he wouldn't know that, but he was a cop. He shouldn't have been that stupid. But mainly the thing I hated about the show was the fact that he's basically like a 13-year-old girl with all these emotions. But they kept trying to beat it in that he has no emotions. Like, no. You can't say that the character has no emotions and then give him every fucking emotion in the world. It doesn't work that way. That was the main thing. I stopped watching it like before the last episode of the first season. I tried to watch the entire thing. I almost watched the entire first season. But I was like, I just do not care anymore. This is a terrible show. Mainly because it just pissed me off too much. Same thing with that stupid show Lie to Me. Lie to Me, the same thing. It's garbage. I can't watch it because I know everything they're saying is just bullshit. Like, no, you can't see people lying by just looking at their face. It doesn't work that way. The best people in the world at detecting lies have a 50% success rate, and that's no better than guessing. An amazing story that actually makes sense, dude. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Ginny and Harry's first kiss came off very awkward. They were supposed to be in a common room surrounded by Gryffindors. She's atop the world because she's just won the Quidditch Cup along her teammates, and Harry finally goes in for the kiss in front of everyone. In the movie, they were alone in a tower, and Ginny's delivered her lines, and that moment came off as awkward. This thread is like Harry Potter. It makes sense. The series was very popular. There were lots of films, so there's lots to talk about. The later books were very long, while the films were not, so there was an awful lot left out. In The Golden Compass, you don't see the actual ending. I hope someone brings that trilogy to screen and does a proper job someday. Oh, The Golden Compass trilogy. That is a really good children's book. Like, the evil and the plot and everything isn't exactly groundbreaking or anything, but the way the story is told is incredibly well done. Holy crap, is it really good. I would love to watch a trilogy about that. How to Train Your Dragons. As part of the Viking boys' training, they have to cut off a limb to the nesting ground. Wait, they have to climb a cliff to the nesting grounds of the dragons and steal a dragon egg to hatch it, so it will be their own personal dragon. They all have them. But Hiccups gets Toothless, who is absolutely tiny. Like, fits underneath his helmet tiny, and he never gets any bigger. At least so far as we are on the 7th book now. His best friend, Fish Legs, is considered just as much of an outcast as Hiccup, because he is super weedy, clumsy, has asthma, and a limp. Also, Hiccup is never considered a hero, even though he saves the village from an evil dragon. And he doesn't lose his leg. Also, the only thing he is good at is swordsmanship. Oh, that sounds way different than the book. TL. Today I learned how to train your dragon as a book. Alright, this is really long. It was an interesting thread, though, because I actually read books. But I'll have to end it here because it's almost 30 minutes long.